The council chamber floated in the darkness of space, a massive ring station where representatives from across the galaxy gathered to discuss matters of peace and trade. Today, however, peace was the furthest thing from Ambassador Shiva's mind as she stood before the assembled delegates, her aquatic features pale with fear. "Please," she said, her voice trembling, "the scourge will reach our system in 30 days. My people have no weapons, no soldiers, no way to defend ourselves. We have only ever known peace." The Villani were an old race, one that had abandoned violence thousands of years ago. Their world of endless oceans and floating cities had never known war. They built things of beauty, created art that moved souls, and lived in harmony with their planet. Now that peaceful existence faced annihilation. The scourge were coming. Everyone in the galaxy knew what that meant. The insectoid representative from Zarth clicked his mandibles. "We sympathize with your situation, Ambassador. However, our defense fleet is stretched thin. We cannot spare ships. The Krill Collective has similar concerns," added another delegate, her crystalline body refracting the chamber's light. "The scourge may target us next. We must protect our own worlds first." One by one, the excuses came. Too far away, too expensive, too risky, not enough ships, not enough time. The Villani were on their own, as so many others had been before them. The scourge had consumed 17 worlds in the past decade, and the galaxy had learned to look away. Shiva felt her heart sinking. She had expected this, but hope died hard. Her people would be extinct within weeks. Millions of years of evolution, thousands of years of civilization, all ending because they had chosen peace over preparation. "If there are no other offers of assistance," the council chairman began, "we shall move to the next. The Terran Federation offers aid." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human representative, a stern woman named Ambassador Chen. Humans were relatively new to the galactic stage, having achieved faster-than-light travel only 70 years ago. They were considered strange by most species, aggressive, unpredictable, and oddly emotional for a spacefaring race. You would help us?" Shiva asked, barely daring to believe. Ambassador Chen stood, her dark eyes serious. "The Terran Federation does not abandon those who ask for help. We are dispatching assistance immediately. Expect our ships within 5 days." "How many ships?" asked the Zarth representative skeptically. "The Scourge fleet numbers over 200 vessels. What can you possibly—" "Enough ships," Chen interrupted. "Ambassador Shiva, prepare your people. Humanity is coming." The transmission ended and the council erupted in whispers. The humans were mad, everyone agreed. They would send a token force, maybe help evacuate some civilians and leave. That was what any sensible species would do. The scourge could not be fought. They could only be survived. Shiva returned to Villani Prime with a heavy heart. She had secured help, yes, but what could the humans really do? They were a young species, barely established in galactic politics. She had seen their ships, functional but nothing impressive. Their military was small compared to the major powers. Still, it was more than nothing, more than anyone else had offered. 5 days later, the human ships arrived. Shiva stood in the orbital observation station, watching the designated coordinates with her military advisor, Commander Thelon. They expected perhaps a cruiser or two, maybe a frigate squadron. What emerged from faster-than-light travel made Thelon's datapad slip from his hands. 3 ships appeared, but calling them ships felt inadequate. The first was a carrier, easily 3 kilometers long, bristling with launch bays and point defense cannons. Its hull was scarred and patched, bearing the marks of dozens of battles. The name Indomitable ran along its side in harsh human letters. The second was even larger, a strange vessel that looked more like a flying factory than a warship. Massive construction arms folded against its hull, and its cargo bays could have swallowed a Villani city whole. Prometheus Rising was its name. The third ship made Shiva's blood run cold. It was smaller than the others, but it radiated menace like a predator among prey. Every line of its design spoke of a single purpose: destruction. Weapon ports covered its surface, and its main cannon ran nearly the length of the ship. The Hammerfell had come to Villani space. "By the deep waters," Thelon whispered. "What are those?" Before Shiva could answer, a communication request came through. A human face appeared on the screen. A woman in her 40s with sharp features and eyes that had seen too much combat. "Ambassador Shiva? I'm Commander Elena Vasquez of the TFS Indomitable. Permission to dock?" We need to discuss defensive strategies immediately. Defensive strategies? Shiva repeated, confused. Commander, we appreciate the evacuation assistance, but evacuation? Vasquez looked genuinely puzzled. Ambassador, we're not here to evacuate. We're here to defend your world. Now, are you going to let us dock, or do we need to set up a meeting in space? We have a lot of work to do and only 25 days to do it. 20 minutes later, Shiva and her advisors sat in the Indomitable's briefing room, staring at holographic displays of their entire planet. Human officers moved around them with purpose, each one focused and efficient. The room hummed with quiet intensity. Commander Vasquez stood at the display, her fingers manipulating the three-dimensional image of Volani Prime. We've completed our initial scans. Your planet has 3 major continents and 17 significant population centers. Your orbital space is empty except for civilian stations. No defense platforms, no military installations, no weapon emplacements. We are a peaceful people, Shiva said softly. We have no need for such things. You do now, Vasquez replied, not unkindly. The Scourge don't care about peace. They care about biomass. Every living thing on your world is food to them. She zoomed in on the largest continent. We'll start here. Chief Engineer Webb is already preparing construction teams. We'll have the first orbital defense platforms operational within 48 hours. 48 hours? Thelen said, shocked. That's impossible. Such construction would take months, even years. A massive man in a grease-stained uniform stepped forward. His name tag read Webb. Respectfully, Commander Thelen, you've never seen human engineers work against a deadline. We built the Mars colonies in 8 months. We constructed the Titan shipyards in 3 years. When humans need something done fast, we make it happen. But the resources, Shiva began. The Prometheus Rising is a mobile construction platform, Webb explained. She carries raw materials, fabrication equipment, and 5,000 of the best engineers in human space. We also have mining drones that can extract what we need from your asteroid belt. Resources aren't the problem. Time as Vasquez pulled up another display. We're also going to need to fortify your population centers. The Scourge will make landfall, they always do. We need bunkers, evacuation routes, and defensive positions. Your people will need to relocate to hardened shelters. Our people have never experienced war, Shiva said, feeling helpless. They don't know how to fight, how to hide, how to... Then we teach them, Vasquez said firmly. Ambassador, I know this is overwhelming. Your people have lived in peace for generations. That's beautiful. That's what we're fighting for. So you can keep that peace. But right now we need you to trust us. Can you do that? Shiva looked at the human commander, at her scarred hands and tired eyes, and saw something she hadn't expected. Genuine determination. This woman wasn't here out of political obligation or for some hidden agenda. She was here because she believed in protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. Yes, Shiva said. We trust you. Tell us what you need. Everything, Vasquez replied. Landing coordinates for construction teams. Lists of all underground caverns and natural shelters. Civilian organization plans. We'll also need volunteers, people willing to learn basic combat skills. They won't be soldiers in 25 days, but they can learn to operate defensive systems. I'll put out the call, Thelen said, straightening. What else? Chief Webb grinned, though it wasn't a happy expression. Coffee, lots of coffee. And tell your people not to panic when they see our work. Human construction methods can be loud. That turned out to be the understatement of the century. Within 6 hours, human shuttles filled Volani skies. Construction crews descended on designated sites with equipment that looked like it belonged in a war zone, not a building project. Massive drills carved into the earth. Mining machines extracted ore at impossible speeds, and fabrication units worked around the clock. The Volani people watched in awe and terror as the humans transformed their world. Explosions echoed across continents as humans used controlled demolitions to create underground bunker complexes. The ground shook. Buildings rattled. Children cried in fear, but the humans kept working. Shiva visited one construction site 3 days after the humans arrived. What had been an empty field was now a massive underground facility, complete with life support, food storage, and medical facilities. Human workers moved in organized chaos, each one knowing exactly what to do. A young human engineer, her face covered in dust, paused to explain the air filtration system to a confused Volani technician. See, the Scourge release toxic spores when they die. This filter catches anything smaller than 0.01 microns. Your people will be safe down here. You've fought them before, the Volani said, not quite a question. The engineer's face darkened. Once colony world called New Providence. We lost. We lost a lot of people before we figured out how to fight them. That's why we're here. So you don't have to learn those lessons the hard way. In orbit, the transformation was even more dramatic. Where empty space had existed, massive defense platforms now floated, each one bristling with railguns and missile batteries. The Prometheus Rising worked non-stop, manufacturing components and assembling structures with mechanical precision. Shiva watched from the observation deck as another platform came online, its weapon systems glowing with power. Beside her, Commander Vasquez reviewed tactical displays on a data pad. 22 days left, Vasquez said. We'll have the primary defense grid complete in 15. That gives us a week for testing and adjustments. Commander, I must ask. Shiva said carefully. Why is humanity doing this? We can never repay you for this effort. We have nothing you need. Vasquez looked up from her pad, and for a moment her professional mask slipped. Ambassador, 70 years ago humanity reached the stars and found out we weren't alone. That was wonderful and terrifying. We also found out that the galaxy can be a cruel place. The Scourge, the Krill slavers, the Zarth expansion wars. We've seen what happens when peaceful species meet violent ones. She turned back to the window, watching her ship's work. Humanity has a saying, those who can must, we can help. So we must, it's that simple. Besides, she smiled grimly. Humans are really, really good at fighting. It's basically all we did for 10,000 years before we reached space. Seems a shame to waste all that practice. Below them, another explosion marked the completion of a bunker complex. Human engineers celebrated briefly before moving on to the next project. They worked 18-hour shifts, slept in temporary barracks, and never complained. 20 days remaining. The orbital defenses were 70% complete. Underground shelters could now house the entire Volani population. Volunteer training was underway, though most Volani struggled with the concept of deliberately harming another living thing. The Hammerfell remained in high orbit, silent and waiting. Shiva had asked Vasquez about it once. The Hammerfell is our seed ship, Vasquez had explained. She's designed for one thing, breaking enemy formations. Her main cannon hasn't been fired in 30 years. Let's hope we don't need it. 15 days remaining. The Scourge fleet was detected at the edge of the system, moving inexorably toward Volani Prime. The humans intensified their efforts. More platforms came online. More bunkers opened. The Indomitable launched fighter squadrons for combat drills. Shiva couldn't sleep. She wandered the corridors of the orbital station, watching humans prepare for war with grim efficiency. They joked with each other, shared meals, told stories about home. They were so alive, so full of energy despite the exhausting work. She found Commander Vasquez in the observation deck at 3 a.m, staring at the distant stars where the Scourge fleet approached. Can we win? Shiva asked quietly. Vasquez didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was honest. I don't know. The Scourge are tough, and there are a lot of them. But here's what I do know. They've never faced humanity before. They think your world is an easy target. They're wrong, and we're going to teach them that lesson, whatever it costs. Why do you fight so readily? Shiva asked. The galaxy thinks humans are aggressive, dangerous even. But I've seen your people these past weeks. You're kind, creative, funny. Why are you also so good at violence? Vasquez smiled sadly. Because sometimes, Ambassador, the only way to protect kindness is with strength. The only way to preserve peace is to be willing to fight for it. Humans learned that lesson over and over throughout our history. We just hope the rest of the galaxy never has to. 10 days remaining. The defense grid was complete. Every Volani citizen had an assigned shelter. Human Marines ran combat drills with the few Volani volunteers who showed aptitude. Most failed, but a handful, those with the right combination of courage and desperation, learned quickly. 5 days remaining. The Scourge fleet entered the outer system. Their bioships were visible now on long-range sensors, massive organic vessels that pulsed with malevolent life. 3 days remaining. Civilian evacuations began. Volani citizens filed into the underground shelters, terrified but trusting the humans who had worked so hard to protect them. 1 day remaining. The human fleet moved into defensive positions. The Indomitable sat at the center, its fighter bays ready. The Prometheus Rising withdrew to high orbit, its construction arms now carrying emergency repair equipment. The Hammerfell powered up its weapons for the first time since arriving. Commander Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, surrounded by her crew. Shiva watched from a secondary station, her hands trembling. "All stations report status," Vasquez ordered. "Orbital defense grid at 100%. All batteries loaded and targeted. Fighter squadrons ready for launch. Pilots are eager, Commander. Marine battalions are at defensive positions. Sir, they say they're ready to show these bugs what humanity thinks of them." Vasquez allowed herself a small smile. "All right, people. The Scourge think this is going to be easy. They think the Villani are helpless prey. Let's show them what happens when humanity decides to answer a call for help." She looked directly at Shiva. "Ambassador, get to the shelter. This is going to get loud." "I'm staying," Shiva said firmly. "These are my people. If they face death, I face it with them." Vasquez nodded with respect. "Suit yourself. Welcome to a human war, Ambassador. It's not pretty, but we're damn good at it." The Scourge fleet entered orbital space, 200 bioships strong, each one oozing with organic weapons and carrying thousands of ground troops. They had done this countless times before. This would be no different. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Chief Engineer Webb stood in the Prometheus Rising's command center, watching the sensors. He opened a channel to Vasquez. "Commander, they're in range of the defense grid." "Fire at will, Chief." Webb allowed himself a savage grin. "With pleasure. Orbital batteries, light them up." The space around Villani Prime erupted in fire as humanity's answer roared across the void. The first railgun round crossed the distance between the orbital platform and the Scourge fleet in less than 2 seconds. It struck a bioship amidships, punching through the organic armor like paper. The ship convulsed, ichor bleeding into space, and then exploded from within as the kinetic energy tore it apart. Then the rest of the defense grid opened fire. The void between Villani Prime and the Scourge fleet became a storm of metal and energy. Hundreds of railgun rounds streaked across space, each one moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The Scourge bioships, expecting minimal resistance, had maintained a tight formation. It was a fatal mistake. The first salvo destroyed 37 ships outright. Another dozen were crippled, their organic hulls ruptured and bleeding atmosphere. The Scourge fleet, which had consumed 17 worlds without serious opposition, suddenly found itself bleeding. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Commander Vasquez watched the tactical display with cold satisfaction. Second salvo. Target the capital ships. The defense platforms adjusted their aim. The larger Scourge vessels, each one capable of carrying hundreds of thousands of ground troops, found themselves under concentrated fire. Their thick armor held for a few seconds, then failed under the relentless bombardment. Direct hit on target Alpha 7, she's breaking apart. Target Alpha 12 is venting atmosphere. Weapons offline. Target Alpha 4 is attempting to regenerate hull damage. Recommend sustained fire. Granted. Burn it down. Ambassador Shiva stood behind Vasquez, her aquatic features pale with shock. The Villani had no concept of warfare on this scale. She had seen the orbital platforms being built, had watched the humans work for weeks, but nothing had prepared her for this display of coordinated destruction. "They're dying," she whispered. "So many are dying." Vasquez didn't look away from her displays. "They came here to eat your people, Ambassador. Every one of those ships carries enough troops to strip a continent of life. I won't apologize for defending your world." The Scourge fleet began to scatter, abandoning their tight formation. It was the tactically sound response, but it had come too late. The human defense grid had been designed by people who had studied every Scourge attack for the past decade, learning from the 17 worlds that had fallen. The firing patterns, adjusted automatically, tracking the dispersing bioships with machine precision. "They're launching fighter analogs," one of the bridge officers reported. "Thousands of them. Small, fast biological constructs." "Launch our fighters," Vasquez ordered. "All squadrons, weapons free. Show them how humans fly." The Indomitable's launch bays opened, and fighters poured into space. Human pilots strapped into machines that responded to their thoughts through neural interfaces met the Scourge swarm with aggressive precision. The contrast was stark. The Scourge fighters moved in instinctive patterns, controlled by hive minds, while the human pilots moved with individual creativity and tactical coordination, Within minutes, the space around Volani Prime became a chaotic battlefield. Human fighters wove through the Scourge swarm, their weapons tearing apart the biological constructs. When missiles ran low, they switched to guns. When gun ammunition depleted, some pilots made the choice that had defined humanity for millennia. They rammed their fighters into larger Scourge vessels, ejecting at the last possible second. Pilot Kowalski just took out a Scourge frigate analog with a collision run, the tactical officer reported. We have his beacon. Recovery shuttle is en route. What's his status? Vasquez asked. He's laughing, Commander. Says he's got 2 more ejection seats if we need him to do it again. Despite the horror of the situation, Vasquez smiled. That's humanity for you, Ambassador. We're insane enough to ram starships and laugh about it. But the Scourge had numbers. For every bioship destroyed, 3 more pressed forward. They had learned their lesson about tight formations and now spread across a wide front, making concentrated fire less effective. Their strategy was simple: overwhelm through sheer mass. It had worked on 17 worlds. It would work here, or so they thought. Scourge fleet is attempting orbital insertion. The sensor officer called out. They're going to make landfall. Let them come, Vasquez said. Chief Webb, are your people ready? On the Prometheus Rising, Chief Engineer Marcus Webb stood in his command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing every defensive installation on Volani Prime. His engineering teams had worked for 25 days straight, sleeping in shifts, eating meals at their workstations, pushing their bodies to the absolute limit of human endurance. Now all that work was about to be tested. All ground installations are online and operational, Webb reported. Bunker cities are sealed. Civilian population is secure. Artillery batteries are loaded. Marines are in position. He cracked his knuckles. We're ready to introduce them to human defensive engineering. The Scourge bioships began their descent through Volani Prime's atmosphere. Massive, pulsating vessels that looked like diseased organs, they carried millions of ground troops. Beetle-like. Warriors the size of hover cars, each one capable of tearing apart a building with their claws. They hit the first layer of defense at 10,000 meters. Human surface-to-air missile batteries opened fire, filling the sky with contrails and explosions. Dozens of Scourge landing craft detonated in the upper atmosphere, raining biological debris across empty fields. But more kept coming. The Scourge were willing to accept massive casualties. They had evolved for overwhelming assault, throwing bodies at problems until the problems drowned in ichor and chitin. They landed on the largest continent in waves, millions of warriors pouring from ruptured bioships. The Beetle soldiers scuttled forward with horrifying speed, mandibles clicking, ready to begin the harvest of Volani Prime. Then they met humanity's second lesson. Humans knew how to build death traps. The Scourge pushed forward across what appeared to be open plains heading toward the nearest Volani city. Halfway there, the ground exploded. Chief Webb had spent 2 weeks mining the entire approach with enough explosives to reshape the landscape. Entire divisions of Scourge warriors simply ceased to exist, vaporized by carefully placed charges. The survivors pushed forward, driven by their hive mind's insistence. They ran directly into the second line of defense, automated turrets that Webb's teams had installed every 100 meters. The turrets were AI-assisted, fast enough to track individual targets and smart enough to prioritize threats. They opened fire with machine guns, grenade launchers, and flamethrowers. The Scourge line staggered under the withering fire, but pressed on. They were tough, redundant, and numerous. A few thousand casualties meant nothing to them. They would overwhelm these defenses as they had overwhelmed so many others. Then they met the third line, human Marines. Sergeant Marcus Dust Callahan lay in his fortified position, watching the Scourge advance through his rifle scope. Around him, his squad did the same, each one a veteran of a dozen conflicts. They had volunteered for this mission when many thought it was suicide. That was fine with them. Marines specialized in impossible missions. Contact in 30 seconds, someone murmured. Remember, Dust said calmly, headshots only. These things can lose limbs and keep fighting. You need to hit the brain cluster behind the forward carapace. Nice and easy. Sarge, there's like 10,000 of them, a younger Marine said, his voice tight with nervousness. Then you'd better not miss, Dust replied. Fire when ready. The Marines opened fire. They didn't spray bullets wildly. Each shot was aimed, controlled, precise. Human marksmanship, honed over centuries of warfare, met alien biology in a test of efficiency versus numbers. The Scourge fell in waves, their brain clusters destroyed by hypervelocity rounds, but more kept coming. Reloading! Switching to grenades. Contact left. Contact left! I see them. Covering fire! The battle devolved into chaos. The Scourge reached the human lines and began close combat. These aliens had evolved for melee warfare, their mandibles and claws designed to tear apart flesh and armor alike. But humans had evolved for something else, adaptability and ruthless efficiency. When rifles ran out of ammunition, Marines switched to shotguns. When shotguns ran dry, they used pistols. When pistols were empty, they pulled out combat knives. When knives broke, they used their hands and whatever they could grab. One Marine killed a Scourge warrior with its own severed claw, then used that claw to kill 3 more. In the command bunker beneath the battlefield, Commander Theln of the Volani Defense Force watched in stunned disbelief. He had never imagined combat could be so brutal, so personal, so utterly without mercy. The humans fought like cornered predators, giving no quarter and expecting none. They're insane, he whispered. They're magnificent, Shiva corrected, standing beside him. She had refused to stay in orbit once the ground battle began, insisting on being with her people. Now she watched as humans died to protect a species they had known for less than a month. They're fighting for us, for people they barely know. Scourge are breaking through on the northern approach, a tactical officer reported. They're heading for Shelter Complex 7, 3,000 civilians inside. Dispatch reinforcements, Theln ordered, though he knew they had none to send. Every human soldier was already engaged. They were outnumbered 50-1. Negative, came a voice over the comms. It was Dust. Northern approach is my sector. We'll handle it. Sergeant, you have 14 Marines. The enemy force is over 500 Scourge warriors. You need to fall back. Respectfully, Commander, that's not happening. These civilians asked for shelter. Humanity doesn't break promises. Dust out. The channel went silent. Theln pulled up the visual feed from the northern approach and watched in horror and awe as 14 humans positioned themselves between 500 aliens and a shelter full of innocent civilians. They held for 40 minutes. Dust and his team used every trick humanity had learned in 10,000 years of warfare. They used the terrain, funneling the Scourge into kill zones. They used combined arms, coordinating rifle fire with grenades and explosives. They used psychological warfare, making noise and movement to seem more numerous than they were. When one Marine fell wounded, another dragged him to cover and kept fighting. When ammunition ran low, they didn't retreat. They fixed bayonets. The Scourge, expecting easy prey, found humans who refused to break. Every meter forward cost them dozens of warriors. Every second of delay meant more civilians reaching safety. The hive mind couldn't understand it. Why were these creatures fighting so hard for beings that weren't even their own species? By the time reinforcements arrived, Dust was the only Marine still standing. He was covered in blood, his own and the Scourge's, and surrounded by hundreds of alien corpses. His rifle was destroyed, his armor was shredded, and he had at least 6 serious wounds. But he was still conscious, still armed with a combat knife, still standing between the enemy and the shelter entrance. Shelter is secure, he reported when the reinforcements reached him. Then he collapsed. The medics got to work immediately, using their skills to stabilize wounds that would have killed any other species. Humans were tough, stupidly tough, evolved on a death world that had tried every way possible to kill them for millions of years. Dust would live, though he'd spend weeks in recovery. The battle raged for 3 days. The Scourge kept landing troops, kept pushing forward, kept expecting the defenders to break. But the humans didn't break. They couldn't afford to. Every shelter they defended contained thousands of Volani lives. Chief Webb worked miracles, using the Prometheus Rising's fabrication facilities to manufacture ammunition, medical supplies, and replacement parts for damaged defensive systems. His engineers worked in the middle of combat zones, repairing turrets under fire, rebuilding defensive positions while Scourge warriors attacked them. One engineer, a woman named Sarah Chen, held a critical supply route by herself for 2 hours when her squad was pinned down. She used a construction mech, a machine designed for lifting cargo as an improvised combat vehicle, crushing Scourge warriors with equipment that was never meant for warfare. In orbit, the battle continued. The Scourge bioships kept coming and the human fleet kept destroying them. But the numbers were telling. The Indomitable had lost a third of its fighter complement. 2 of the orbital defense platforms had been destroyed. Human casualties mounted. On the 3rd day, Commander Vasquez stood on the bridge reviewing reports and realized the truth. They were losing. Not quickly, not obviously, but inevitably. The Scourge simply had too many ships, too many warriors. Humanity was fighting with everything they had, but eventually the numbers would overwhelm them. "Commander," the tactical officer said quietly, "Scourge capital ships are forming up. They're preparing for a massive orbital bombardment. If they target the shelters directly, the shelters could withstand conventional attacks. But if the Scourge were willing to sacrifice dozens of their own ships to punch through the defenses, they could reach the civilians. Millions would die." Vasquez stood silent for a long moment, running calculations in her head. Then she opened a channel to the Hammerfell. "Captain Morrison, this is Commander Vasquez. Authorization code Vasquez Theta 9. I need your main gun." There was a long pause. Everyone on the bridge knew what that meant. The Hammerfell's main weapon was a mass driver cannon that ran nearly the full length of the ship. It fired projectiles at relativistic speeds with enough energy to crack a planet's crust. The weapon hadn't been used in 30 years because the last time it fired, it had destroyed an entire enemy fleet, along with 3 friendly ships that were too close to the target. "Commander," Captain Morrison said carefully, "you know what you're asking. The targeting requirements, I know, Captain. But if we don't break that formation now, we lose the planet. All of it. Every Villani. Every human marine, every civilian we've been protecting. I need that gun." Another pause. "Understood. Powering up the main cannon. We'll need 15 minutes to charge." "You have 10, Vasquez said and closed the channel. She turned to Shiva, who had been listening in growing horror. "Ambassador, I need you to order a planet-wide alert. Everyone underground, as deep as possible. What I'm about to do is going to light up your sky." "What are you doing?" Shiva asked, though she already knew the answer. "I'm using the biggest gun humanity ever built," Vasquez said grimly. "And I'm praying I don't miss. Get underground, Ambassador, now." Chief Webb had been coordinating defensive operations when the alert came through. He looked at the tactical display, saw the Hammerfell moving into position, and started laughing despite the exhaustion and stress. "Those magnificent bastards are actually doing it," he said to no one in particular. He opened a channel to all human forces on the ground. "All personnel, this is Chief Webb. Get underground immediately. I mean, right now. Forget what you're doing, just get below ground and get something solid over your head. The Hammerfell is about to show these bugs why humans don't build weapons for show." On the ground, Dust, barely conscious in a medical bay, heard the announcement and smiled through his pain. "About time. I was getting tired of the fair fight." In orbit, the Hammerfell completed its positioning. The siege ship had been designed for one purpose: breaking enemy formations that conventional weapons couldn't handle. Its main gun was a marvel of human engineering, a weapon that channeled unimaginable amounts of energy into a single projectile. Captain Morrison sat in his command chair, running final calculations. His crew moved with practiced precision, each one knowing their role. They had trained for this moment, even though they hoped never to use it. "Main gun charged to 90%, the weapons officer reported. "Target lock acquired on the Scourge capital formation. 95%. 100%. Ready to fire, Captain." Morrison took a deep breath. "All human ships clear the firing lane. Villani forces, get your people underground. This is going to be loud." He opened a fleet-wide channel, for humanity and for those who asked us for shelter. "Fire." The Hammerfell fired its main gun, and the universe answered with thunder. The projectile left the Hammerfell traveling at 12% the speed of light. It crossed the distance to the Scourge capital formation in less than 3 seconds. The beam of superheated plasma that followed the projectile's path was visible from the surface of Villani Prime, a line of blue-white fury that split the night sky. The first capital ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist. The relativistic projectile passed through it like it wasn't there, the kinetic energy vaporizing organic matter instantly. The ship behind it suffered the same fate, and the one behind that, the projectile, barely slowed by passing through living starships, continued through the formation. 12 Scourge capital ships vanished in less than a second. The plasma beam superheated matter from the destroyed ships spread outward in a cone of death. 6 more capital ships found themselves bathed in temperatures normally found in the hearts of stars. Their organic armor, evolved over millions of years to resist conventional weapons, meant nothing. They burned, screaming their death songs across alien frequencies, and died. On the bridge of the Indomitable, the tactical display updated in real time. 18 capital ships gone. The Scourge formation, which had been preparing for orbital bombardment, broke apart in chaos. The hive mind controlling them, spread across hundreds of bioships, experienced something it had never known before. Fear. Direct hit, the tactical officer reported, his voice awed despite his training. 18 confirmed kills. The Scourge formation is scattering. Commander Vasquez allowed herself a moment of satisfaction, then snapped back to business. Don't let them regroup. All fighters pursue. Orbital batteries fire at will. I want every ship that's running to think twice about coming back. The human fighters, already aggressive by galactic standards, heard the order and responded with enthusiasm. They had been holding defensive positions for 3 days, watching friends die, watching their ammunition dwindle. Now they were unleashed. The pilots pushed their fighters to maximum acceleration, hunting down fleeing Scourge vessels with predatory intensity. Lieutenant Amy Chen, flying her fighter with neural precision, locked onto a Scourge frigate trying to escape. Her missile racks were empty, but her guns still had ammunition. She closed to point-blank range, a distance that made her wingman scream warnings over the comm, and poured fire into the bioship's engines. The organic propulsion system ruptured, and the ship began tumbling out of control. Fox 4, what are you doing? Her wingman called. You're inside their weapon range. They don't have weapons anymore, Chen replied, watching the frigate break apart. They just have fear, and they should be afraid. They attacked the wrong planet. On the ground, the Scourge forces received no new orders. The hive mind, its capital ships destroyed or fleeing, lost coordination. The Beetle warriors, evolved to follow commands without question, found themselves suddenly alone with their basic instincts. Some kept fighting. Others attempted to flee. Many simply froze, their limited individual intelligence unable to cope with the loss of guidance. Human Marines, battered and exhausted, pressed their advantage. Sergeant Dust, conscious again despite his injuries, refused to stay in the medical bay. He armed himself with a rifle and returned to the battlefield, ignoring the protests of the medical staff. Sarge, you need rest, one of his Marines said. I'll rest when they're gone, Dust replied, loading his weapon. Right now we finish this. The tide had turned, but battles don't end cleanly. The Scourge on the ground still numbered in the millions, and even disorganized, they were dangerous. Human forces began systematic clearing operations, moving through contested areas with methodical precision. Chief Webb's defensive installations, battered but functional, provided fire support. One Scourge concentration held out near Shelter Complex 12. Cut off from the hive mind, they had reverted to their most basic instinct: consume. They tore into the ground, trying to dig toward the shelter, trying to reach the Villani civilians hiding beneath. A team of human combat engineers reached the site first. Led by Sergeant Maria Santos, they found the Scourge literally eating through the earth, their powerful mandibles grinding through rock and soil. The shelter's outer wall would be breached within hours. Can't use explosives, Santos muttered, reviewing the situation. Too close to the shelter. Heavy weapons might damage the structure. She grinned without humor. Looks like we do this the old-fashioned way. Everyone grab a flamethrower. We're going bug hunting. Her team descended into the tunnels the Scourge had created, fighting in absolute darkness against enemies evolved for subterranean warfare. The humans used thermal imaging, coordinated tactics, and sheer stubborn courage. They cleared tunnel after tunnel, incinerating Scourge warriors in close combat that tested the limits of human nerve. Santos personally held a critical junction for 30 minutes, while her team evacuated wounded. She stood in a tunnel barely tall enough to crouch in, using a flamethrower to create a wall of fire between the Scourge and her people. When her fuel ran out, she switched to a shotgun. When the shotgun was empty, she used demolition charges, collapsing the tunnel on herself and the advancing Scourge. Her team dug her out 3 hours later, alive and furious that they had taken so long in orbit. The battle continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Scourge fleet, shattered and demoralized, attempted to withdraw. Commander Vasquez faced a decision. She could let them go, save ammunition and lives, declare victory, or she could ensure they never threatened another world. She thought of 17 planets consumed. She thought of millions of beings who had died because the scourge went unchallenged. She thought of Ambassador Shiva's face when she had begged for help from a galaxy that turned away. "All ships," she ordered, her voice cold as void. "No survivors." "We end this here, Commander," her XO said quietly. They're fleeing." The rules of engagement. The rules of engagement are written by people who never faced the scourge, Vasquez interrupted. These things don't surrender. They don't negotiate. They consume. If we let them escape, they'll return with more ships and attack another world. How many civilians have to die before the galaxy learns this lesson? She looked at her XO directly. "I'll take full responsibility, but we're ending this threat. Permanently." The Indomitable led the pursuit, its fighters and remaining weapons hunting down fleeing scourge vessels. The Hammerfell, its main gun depleted, used conventional weapons. Even the Prometheus Rising, a construction ship, deployed its limited defenses. The message was clear. Humanity was done playing defense. The Scourge Queen Mind, distributed across the surviving bioships, made a calculation. In 10,000 years of existence across hundreds of worlds, the Scourge had never retreated. They had never needed to. They overwhelmed resistance through numbers and consumed everything in their path. It was their nature, their purpose, their evolutionary destiny. But evolution required survival, and survival required learning. The Queen Mind issued an unprecedented command: full retreat. Jump to faster-than-light travel. Abandon this system, flee to dark space where the humans couldn't follow. The cost was enormous. Abandoning ground forces meant losing millions of warriors. Leaving behind bioships meant reducing their fleet strength. But the alternative was extinction. The remaining Scourge capital ships engaged their organic FTL drives and vanished, leaving behind nearly 3 million ground forces with no way off the planet. On Volani Prime, those abandoned Scourge warriors faced a choice they had never encountered before: surrender or death. The hive mind was gone. Individual intelligence, suppressed for millions of years of evolution, flickered weakly. Some kept fighting mindlessly, others simply stopped moving, their primitive brains unable to process their situation. Commander Theln, watching from the command bunker, made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Broadcast a message in all frequencies. Tell them to lay down their weapons and gather in designated areas. If they comply, we will not kill them. A human officer looked at him in shock. "Commander, these things were trying to eat your people." "And you taught us something," Theln replied. "Humanity fights with incredible violence, but also with mercy when the fight is won. If we kill helpless enemies, we become the monsters." He looked at Shiva, who nodded agreement. "We are Volani. We choose peace when peace is possible." It was a controversial decision. Many Scourge warriors couldn't understand surrender and had to be eliminated. But thousands did gather in the designated areas. Their weapons dropped, their threat neutralized. For the first time in their species' history, Scourge warriors experienced captivity. The battle for Volani Prime was over. The humans had won, but victory was measured in scars. The casualty reports came in over the following days. 40% of human fighters destroyed or damaged beyond repair. 2,300 Marines dead, another 4,000 wounded. The Indomitable had suffered critical damage to its port side, 3 decks exposed to vacuum. 2 orbital defense platforms completely destroyed, 5 more heavily damaged, but Volani Prime stood. Of the 8 million Volani civilians, 30,000 had died, mostly from accidents during the evacuation or shelter collapses during bombardment. It was a tragedy, but measured against the extinction the Scourge would have delivered, it was a miracle. Ambassador Shiva walked through the human medical bay 3 days after the last shot was fired. The bay was overwhelmed with wounded human and Volani working side by side to treat everyone. She found Commander Vasquez there, refusing treatment until her people were cared for. "Commander, you need medical attention," Shiva said, seeing the bandages and the exhaustion on Vasquez's face. "I'm fine," Vasquez replied, though she clearly wasn't. "How are your people?" "Alive because of you, because of all of you." Shiva sat beside her, struggling with emotions she had no words for. "Commander, why did you do this?" "We are not your people. We had nothing to offer you. You could have sent a token force and left. Instead, you fought like we were your own. Why? Vasquez was quiet for a long moment, watching medics work on a Marine who had lost a leg. Ambassador, do you know what humanity's greatest strength is? It's not our technology or our tactics. It's that we're too stupid to know when something is impossible. You asked for shelter. Anyone else heard evacuation request? We heard protect them. She turned to look at Shiva directly. Before we reached the stars, humans fought each other for thousands of years. World wars, civil wars, every kind of conflict you can imagine. We nearly destroyed ourselves a dozen times, but we also learned something. The cost of helping someone is always less than the cost of watching them die and doing nothing. Always. Your people sacrificed so much, Shiva said, tears flowing freely now. In Villani culture, tears were sacred, only shed for the deepest emotions. That's what sacrifice means, Vasquez said gently. Doing something that costs you because it's the right thing to do. Your people gave us something in return, though you don't realize it. What could we possibly give you? Purpose, Vasquez replied. For 10,000 years, humans were predators. We evolved to hunt, to fight, to survive. When we reached the stars, we worried we'd become the monsters, that all that violence would make us conquerors. But this showed us we can be protectors instead. You gave us a reason to be strong. You gave us a reason to fight. That's worth more than you know. A medical officer finally convinced Vasquez to lie down for treatment. As the medics worked on her injuries, she kept talking. The galaxy thinks humans are aggressive and dangerous. They're right, but they don't understand that we can choose who that aggression targets. We're dangerous to the Scourge. We're dangerous to anyone who threatens innocent beings, but we're the best friends you could ask for. Shiva stayed with her until the medical treatment was complete. Around them, the bay bustled with activity. Human doctors treated Villani patients with the same care as their own species. Villani volunteers, untrained but eager to help, fetched supplies and comforted the wounded. In the aftermath of violence, two species learned to work together. Chief Engineer Webb was already planning the reconstruction. The Prometheus Rising, damaged but functional, began manufacturing materials for rebuilding. The defensive platforms that survived would be upgraded. The bunker cities would become permanent infrastructure. Villani Prime would emerge from this war stronger than before. Webb visited one of the surface sites where a battle had raged. The landscape was scarred, cratered from explosives and weapon fire. Scourge corpses were being cleared by automated systems. It looked like hell, but Webb saw something else. Opportunity. We're going to help you rebuild all of this, he told the Villani engineers accompanying him. But we're also going to teach you how to build defensively, how to maintain weapon systems, how to be ready if something like this happens again. We are a peaceful people, one of the Villani said hesitantly. We do not want to become warriors. You don't have to be warriors, Webb replied. But you need to be prepared. Peace is wonderful, but peace without the ability to defend it is just asking to be a victim. We'll teach you to be strong. What you do with that strength is up to you. The captured Scourge warriors presented a unique problem. The Galactic Council wanted them destroyed. They were too dangerous to keep alive. The Villani, however, refused. Commander Thelen argued passionately that destroying helpless prisoners would make them no better than the Scourge themselves. Humanity offered a compromise. The Scourge would be studied, their biology analyzed, their hive mind mechanisms understood. If they could be rehabilitated, separated from the hive permanently, they might become individuals. If not, they would be humanely kept in isolation. It was a long shot, but it was better than mass execution. Scientists from multiple species arrived to study these captured Scourge. What they found was disturbing and sad. Creatures evolved entirely for warfare with almost no individual identity. But there were sparks of something more, hints that with the hive mind gone, individuality could emerge. It would take years, maybe decades, but there was hope. 1 week after the battle ended, the Indomitable prepared to depart. The ship was barely flight-worthy, held together by emergency patches and Chief Webb's engineering miracles. But Commander Vasquez insisted on leaving. Villani Prime needed to begin healing, and the human presence was a reminder of trauma. Ambassador Shiva stood in the orbital station's docking bay, watching the human crew prepare for departure. She had prepared a speech, something eloquent and worthy of the sacrifice these beings had made. When the moment came, all her prepared words evaporated. "Thank you," she said simply. "Thank you for everything." Vasquez smiled, tired but genuine. You're welcome, Ambassador. Take care of your people, and remember what you learned. Peace is precious, but defending it isn't weakness. It's responsibility. Will we see you again? Shiva asked. Maybe, Vasquez said. The galaxy is a big place and humanity is still exploring. But if you ever need help again, really need it, send word. We'll come. That's what friends do. The Indomitable departed, followed by the Prometheus Rising and the Hammer fell. They left behind a transformed world. Volani Prime had defense platforms, trained defensive forces, and the knowledge that they weren't alone in the galaxy. They also left behind something intangible but precious: hope. In the command bunker that would become Volani Prime's military headquarters, Commander Thelen stood before a memorial wall. Names were being engraved. Every human who had died defending their world. It would take weeks to complete. Next to the human names would be Volani names, their own people who had fallen. We will remember, Thelen said quietly. We will tell our children, and they will tell theirs. We will remember the day humanity answered our call for shelter, and sent us commanders to lead, builders to fortify, and bombers to defend. We will remember that we are not alone. The Scourge fleet, what remained of it, fled into dark space and never returned to that sector of the galaxy. They had learned that some prey fought back, and some prey had friends who were very, very good at violence. The Galactic Council held emergency sessions for weeks after the Battle of Volani Prime. They debated human tactics, questioned human aggression, worried about human military capability. Some proposed sanctions. Others suggested restrictions on human fleet movements. Ambassador Chen listened to it all with barely concealed contempt. When the debate finally died down, she stood to address the council. For weeks you've debated humanity's actions. You've questioned our methods, our morals, our right to intervene. I have one question for you. Where were you? She looked around the chamber. Ambassador Shiva stood where I'm standing now and begged for help. 17 worlds had already fallen. Millions were already dead. And you did nothing. You offered sympathy, offered evacuation options, offered words. Humanity offered ships, soldiers, and blood. The chamber was silent. Chen continued, her voice sharp. You call us aggressive? Yes, we are. You call us dangerous? Absolutely. But we're dangerous to slavers, to world eaters, to anyone who threatens innocent beings. If that makes us outlaws in your eyes, so be it. We'll be outlaws who sleep soundly, knowing we helped someone who needed it. The Terran Federation will continue to act according to our own principles. We will help those who ask for help. We will defend those who cannot defend themselves, and we will fight anyone who tries to stop us. This council can sanction us, condemn us, or thank us. Frankly, we don't care which. The people of Volani Prime know what we are, their friends. Chen sat down. The council erupted in arguments, but the humans had made their position clear. They would not apologize for defending Volani Prime. They would not promise to follow rules written by beings who valued procedure over lives. 4 other species, watching the debate, quietly sent messages to Earth requesting military aid against various threats. Humanity had proven something the galaxy needed to know. Some species would fight for you, not for profit or territory, but simply because it was right. The Scourge, wherever they fled, carried with them a new understanding. The galaxy had changed. There was a new predator now, one that didn't hunt for food or territory. Humanity hunted monsters, and they were terrifyingly good at it. On Volani Prime, life began returning to normal, though normal had changed forever. Children played in parks built over old battlefields. Adults worked in cities that now had defensive walls. Volunteers trained with weapons they hoped never to use again. And above it all, in stationary orbit, sat a gift from humanity. A single defense platform, maintained by a joint Volani human crew. It was a reminder and a promise. You are not alone, and you never will be again. Ambassador Shiva stood on a balcony overlooking her capital city, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. Somewhere up there, human ships were patrolling, making sure the Scourge didn't return. Somewhere down here, human engineers were teaching Volani how to maintain their new defenses. She thought about the galaxy she had known, where the strong consumed the weak and the peaceful died alone. Then she thought about the new galaxy, where at least one species had decided that wasn't acceptable. Thank you, humanity, she whispered to the sunset, for teaching us that we deserve to survive. 3 months after the Battle of Volani Prime, the transformation was almost complete. Where ruins had stood, new buildings rose. Where empty fields had hosted battles, memorial gardens now grew. The scars remained. You couldn't erase that much violence. But life had returned to something resembling normalcy. Commander Elena Vasquez stood in what would become the Villani Defense Academy, watching construction crews put finishing touches on the main building. She had requested discharge from active duty and accepted the position of Chief Military Advisor to Villani Prime. The decision had surprised many in the Terran Federation, but not those who knew her. "You're really staying?" Chief Engineer Marcus Webb asked, joining her at the observation window. He had also chosen to remain, overseeing the reconstruction efforts. The Prometheus Rising had returned to human space, but Webb had transferred to civilian service. Villani Prime needed builders more than the fleet did. "Someone has to teach them," Vasquez replied. "They're good people, Webb. They deserve a chance to defend what they've built. And honestly, I'm tired of war. Teaching people how to avoid war? That's something I can do." Webb nodded. "Fair enough. The reconstruction is 90% complete. Defense grid is better than what we installed during the battle. Your students are actually learning faster than I expected." "Villani are quick learners," Vasquez agreed. "They just never had a reason to learn warfare before. Now they do." The academy was humanity's gift to Villani Prime, a fully equipped training facility for defensive warfare. It taught strategy, tactics, weapons operation, and most importantly, the philosophy of defensive strength. The core principle was simple: be strong enough that no one dares attack, but never use that strength for conquest. Commander Theln approached them, carrying data pads filled with reports. He had become the academy's director, despite having no military background before the Scourge arrived. 3 months of combat had changed him, aged him, but also strengthened him. "The first class of trainees is ready for your inspection, Commander Vasquez," he said formally. 200 volunteers, all veterans of the battle. They want to ensure nothing like the Scourge ever catches us unprepared again. "Let's see what they've learned," Vasquez said. The training ground was impressive, a full simulation facility capable of recreating any combat scenario. 200 Villani, all wearing the new defensive force uniform, stood in formation. They weren't Marines. They never would be. But they were capable, trained defenders ready to protect their world. Vasquez walked along the ranks, seeing faces she recognized. The civilian who had helped coordinate evacuations, the engineer who had learned to repair combat equipment under fire, the medical technician who had saved dozens of lives in the field hospitals. They had all been ordinary people 3 months ago. War had made them something more. "At ease," she said, and the formation relaxed slightly. "I've reviewed your training scores. Most of you exceed minimum standards. Some of you are exceptional. You should be proud of what you've accomplished. But I want you to understand something important." She paused, making sure every eye was on her. "Being a defender isn't about how well you shoot. It's about knowing when to shoot. Humanity has fought thousands of wars. We're very good at violence. But the wars we're proudest of? They're the ones we prevented through strength. The battles we didn't have to fight because we were prepared. Your people chose peace for millennia. That was beautiful. That was right. But peace without strength is vulnerability. What you're learning here isn't how to be aggressive. It's how to be strong enough that aggression against you becomes too costly. Do you understand?" "Yes, Commander," 200 voices replied in unison. Vasquez smiled. "Good, dismissed. Enjoy your leave. You've earned it." As the trainees filed out, Ambassador Shiva joined the group. She had been watching from the observation deck. "They learn well. You've given us a gift, Commander." "They were always capable," Vasquez replied. "They just needed someone to show them how." "Speaking of gifts, how's the shipyard project coming?" Shiva's expression brightened. "Better than expected. The Remembrance is ahead of schedule. She'll launch within 2 months. The Remembrance was Villani Prime's first true warship, designed jointly by Villani and human engineers. It wasn't large, a frigate-class vessel, but it was sophisticated, incorporating both Villani technology and human weapons systems. More importantly, it was a symbol. Villani Prime could defend itself. "I'd like to be there for the launch," Vasquez said. "If you'll have me." "You and every human who fought for us will have honored places," Shiva assured her. "Speaking of which, the memorial dedication is tomorrow. Will you speak?" Vasquez hesitated. She hated speeches, hated putting her feelings into words that seemed inadequate, but she owed it to the people who had died here. I'll speak. No promises it'll be eloquent. The memorial sat at the exact spot where the first human shuttles had landed 3 months ago. It was a massive structure, 50 meters tall, depicting 3 figures: a commander studying a tactical display, a builder wielding tools, and a Marine holding a rifle. The sculptor had captured something essential about humanity, the combination of intelligence, creativity, and controlled violence that defined them. At the base of the memorial, names were engraved. 2,300 human names, 30,000 Villani names, every person who had died during the battle, immortalized in stone that would last millennia. The dedication ceremony drew crowds from across the planet. Villani came to honor the fallen. Human personnel, those who had stayed and those who had returned for the ceremony, came to remember their friends. Even representatives from other species attended, including several who had voted against helping Villani Prime at the Galactic Council. Sergeant Marcus Dust Callahan stood near the memorial, leaning heavily on a cane. His wounds had healed, but he would never move quite as well as before. He didn't care. He had done his job, protected civilians who needed protection. The medals on his chest, awarded by both Villani and human governments, meant less than the children's drawings he had received from the shelter he had defended, those he had framed and kept. Sergeant Callahan, a soft voice said. He turned to find a young Villani woman, holding a small child. I wanted to thank you. We were in Shelter Complex 7, you saved us. Dust felt uncomfortable with gratitude. He had just been doing his job. Ma'am, I was just... You stood between death and my daughter, the woman interrupted gently. For 40 minutes you held them back while we escaped deeper into the shelter. I watched on the security feeds. You and your squad refused to retreat. 3 of your soldiers died protecting us. She touched his arm lightly. Words are inadequate, but thank you. For everything. The child, barely 4 years old, held up a drawing. It showed a figure with a rifle standing in front of smaller figures. The proportions were wrong, the colors chaotic, but the message was clear. You're the hero, the child said seriously. Mama says you're why we're alive. Dust took the drawing with trembling hands. He had killed hundreds during that battle, maybe thousands. But this, protecting one child, this was what mattered. I'm glad you're safe, he managed to say. That's why we were here. Chief Webb found him later, still staring at the drawing. You okay, Dust? Yeah, Dust said quietly. Just thinking. We lost good people here, Chief. Jenny, Marcus, Rodriguez, all of them. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. Webb looked at the crowds of Villani families, at the children playing near the memorial, at the life that filled this space. 8 million people, Dust, that's how many we saved. Was it worth 3,000 human lives? That's not my calculation to make. But I know Jenny, I know what she would say. She'd say, yeah, it was worth it. She'd say she joined the Marines to protect people, and that's exactly what she did. She was 19, Dust said, his voice rough with emotion. She was a Marine, Webb corrected gently, and she died doing what Marines do, standing between civilians and death. We honor her by remembering that, by making sure her sacrifice meant something. Look around, Dust, it meant something. The ceremony began. Commander Thelen spoke first, his words carrying the weight of someone who had seen war and understood its cost. He thanked the humans, honored the fallen, and made a promise. Villani Prime would never forget. Then Vasquez stepped to the podium. She had prepared notes but left them behind. What she had to say came from somewhere deeper than prepared remarks. I'm not good at speeches, she began. I'm a soldier. I'm better at actions than words. But I'm going to try because the people whose names are on this memorial deserve words, even if they're clumsy ones. She looked at the crowd, seeing humans and Villani standing together. 3 months ago, Ambassador Shiva asked the galaxy for help. Most species said no. They had reasons, good reasons, but they said no. Humanity said yes. Why? Because we're aggressive? Because we're warlike? Because we wanted something from Villani Prime? Vasquez shook her head. We said yes because someone asked for help and we could help. It's that simple and that complicated. Humans have a long history of conflict. We fought each other over everything imaginable. But we've also learned something through all that fighting. The cost of standing by is always higher than the cost of standing up. The people whose names are behind me understood that. They weren't drafted. They weren't forced. They volunteered to defend a species they had never met. on a world they had never seen against an enemy that gave no mercy. They did it because it was right, because someone needed help, because that's what humans do when given a choice between action and inaction. She paused, emotion threatening to break through her professional composure. Some people call us aggressive. They're right. We are aggressive against injustice, against cruelty, against anything that threatens innocent beings. If that makes us dangerous, then we'll be dangerous. But we'll be dangerous in defense of others, never in conquest of them. To the humans who fell here, you did your job perfectly. You protected people who needed protection. You held the line when it would have been easier to break. You gave everything so that millions could have a future. We will never forget you. We will honor your memory by continuing your work, by standing up when others need us, by being strong enough to protect the weak, by being human in the best sense of that word. And to the Velani who fell, you showed courage that many species never discover. You faced unimaginable horror and didn't break. You learned warfare in weeks and fought beside us as equals. Your people chose peace for millennia. And when that peace was threatened, you found strength you didn't know you had. We're honored to have fought beside you. Vasquez stepped back from the podium, her eyes glistening. The crowd was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause that echoed across the memorial grounds. Later, as the sun set and the crowds dispersed, small groups gathered around the memorial. Humans told stories about fallen friends. Velani shared memories of those they had lost. The two species, so different in their histories and natures, found common ground in shared grief and shared survival. Ambassador Chen arrived from Earth for the ceremony, bringing with her news from the Galactic Council. She found Vasquez sitting near the memorial alone with her thoughts. The council formally censured the Terran Federation, Chen said without preamble. 17 different violations of intervention protocols. They want us to promise never to do this again. What did you tell them? Vasquez asked. I told them to shove their protocols where their sun doesn't shine, Chen replied with satisfaction. Then I told them that 4 other species have formally requested human military assistance. The Krill are threatening the Pleiadian colonies. The Vorash mining worlds are facing pirate raids, and 2 others have scourge sightings near their space. They all want what you gave Velani Prime, protection. And, Vasquez prompted, and the Terran Federation is sending ships, Chen said. The Council is furious, but they can't do anything about it. We're not breaking laws. We're responding to requests for help. What are they going to do, sanction us for not letting people die? She sat beside Vasquez, looking at the memorial. You started something here, Elena. You showed the galaxy that humans won't stand by when we can help. That's going to have consequences, good consequences or bad? Vasquez asked. Both, Chen admitted. Some species will fear us more. Some will ask for our help. Some will try to use us. But here's what matters. Species like the Velani now know they're not alone. The Scourge know they're not invincible. And humanity knows what we want to be in this galaxy. Not conquerors, but protectors. That's a heavy responsibility, Vasquez said quietly. It is, Chen agreed. But we're humans. We do heavy responsibilities. It's kind of our thing. The shipyard orbiting Velani Prime was a joint operation, combining Velani construction expertise with human military engineering. The remembrance took shape over weeks, a sleek vessel that looked more like a Velani civilian ship than a human warship, but carried weapons that could defend against another Scourge attack. Chief Webb personally oversaw the weapons installation. The main guns were human-designed railguns, proven effective against bioships. The point defense system was Velani innovation, faster and more efficient than human equivalents. The shield generators were a hybrid, combining the best of both technologies. She's beautiful, Theln said, watching the final components being installed. He had been promoted to Admiral, head of Velani Prime's new defense force. The rank sat awkwardly on him. He had been a civilian analyst 3 months ago, but he had grown into it. She's functional, Webb corrected, but he was smiling. Beauty in a warship is about efficiency, Admiral. And this one is very efficient. Your engineers did good work. They learned from the best, Thelon replied. When do you return to Earth? I'm not, Webb said simply. I've accepted a permanent position here, heading up the Joint Construction Program. The Terran Federation approved it. They figure I can do more good here teaching your people than I can building ships in human space. We're honored to have you, Theln said sincerely, though I suspect your family misses you. Webb's expression soured. Don't have much family left, Admiral. Lost my wife to the Proxima conflict. Kids are grown and scattered across the colonies. This is my family now. The work, the people who need the work done. That's enough for me. The launch ceremony for the remembrance was smaller than the memorial dedication, but no less meaningful. Admiral Thelen stood at the podium in the shipyard's observation deck, addressing a crowd of Villani and human engineers, military personnel, and government officials. This ship represents more than defense capability, Thelen said. She represents our transformation from a people who hoped peace would be enough, to a people who understand that peace must be protected. We named her Remembrance not to glorify war, but to remember what happens when peaceful people have no way to defend themselves. He gestured to the ship floating in the construction cradle, her hull gleaming in the light of Villani Prime's sun. She is our promise. Never again will we be helpless. Never again will we depend entirely on the goodwill of others. We will stand on our own, though we hope to always stand alongside our friends. The Remembrance launched to applause from both species. Her engines powered up smoothly, human technology integrated seamlessly with Villani design. She moved with grace unexpected in a warship, a perfect blend of two philosophies, Villani elegance and human pragmatism. She handles well, the Villani captain reported from the bridge. Commander Yashin was one of the original volunteers who had learned combat during the Scourge attack. She had proven herself capable under fire, and had spent the past 3 months training obsessively to command this vessel. All systems optimal. Weapons online. Shields at full capacity. The Remembrance is ready for duty. Then welcome to the Defense Force, Captain, Thelen replied formally. May you never need to fire your weapons in anger, but always be ready if you must. It was the philosophy Vasquez had instilled in all her students. Hope for peace, prepare for war. The political ramifications of Villani Prime continued to ripple across the galaxy. The Galactic Council remained divided on humanity's actions. Some species applauded the intervention. Others feared it set a dangerous precedent. A few quietly wondered if humanity might solve problems they had ignored for too long. The Krill Collective, a species that had built an empire on conquest and subjugation, watched humanity's actions with particular interest. They had assumed humans were weak, their talk of helping others mere propaganda. The Battle of Villani Prime suggested otherwise. The Krill began reviewing their expansion plans, suddenly uncertain if enslaving species under human protection was worth the risk. The Scourge, scattered and traumatized, avoided any system with human presence. For a species that had consumed worlds for millennia, it was a humiliating adaptation, but evolution cared nothing for pride, only survival. The Scourge had learned that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. 4 months after the battle, a delegation from the Pleiadian colonies arrived at Villani Prime. Their worlds faced Krill invasion, and they had formally requested human military assistance. They came to see what humanity had done for the Villani, to understand what they were asking for. Ambassador Shiva personally gave them the tour, showing them the defense installations, the training academy, the memorial to the fallen. She introduced them to Admiral Thelen, to the trainees who had become defenders, to the human personnel who had stayed to help rebuild. This is what humanity offers, she told the delegation. Not occupation, not conquest, but genuine partnership. They will bleed for you if necessary, but they will also teach you to defend yourselves. They ask nothing in return except that you use their gift wisely. The Pleiadian ambassador, a crystalline being named Sarath, studied the memorial for a long time. And if we accept their help, what happens when they leave? Do we become dependent on human protection? The humans are already leaving, Shiva replied, gesturing to the shipyard where the Remembrance orbited. See that vessel? We built it ourselves with human guidance but Villani engineering. In 6 months, we will have 3 more. In a year, we will have a fleet. The humans didn't make us dependent, they made us capable. But the cost, Sarath said softly, looking at the names on the memorial. So many died. Yes, Shiva agreed. War has costs. The Scourge would have killed 8 million of my people. Instead, we lost 30,000 Villani, and humanity lost 3,000 of their own. Those losses devastate me. But the alternative was extinction. The humans paid a price in blood to give us a future. That is their answer. They will fight for you if you cannot fight for yourself, but they will also ensure you can eventually stand alone. The delegation departed 3 days later, their decision made. They would accept human assistance. The Krill would discover, as the Scourge had, that humanity took the defense of others seriously. On Earth, the Terran Federation faced its own reckoning. The military wanted to expand, to build more ships, to train more Marines for what they saw as an inevitable series of defensive wars. Some politicians worried about overextension, about humanity becoming the galaxy's police force against their will. Admiral Sarah Martinez, head of Terran Fleet Command, addressed the Federation Congress with characteristic bluntness. "We have a choice," she said. "We can be the species that helps when asked, or we can be the species that looks away when others die. There is no middle ground. If we choose to help, we must be prepared for the consequences. More battles like Volani Prime, more casualties, more sacrifice. If we choose to look away, we must accept that we had the power to help and chose not to. Which can you live with?" The debate raged for weeks. In the end, the Federation voted to expand the defensive fleet and establish a rapid response force. Ships and personnel specifically designated for rendering aid to allied species under attack. It wasn't an easy decision, and many worried about the precedent. But humanity had defined itself at Volani Prime, and most humans decided they liked that definition. 6 months after the battle, Commander Vasquez stood in the Academy's main hall, watching her latest class of graduates receive their certifications. 200 more trained defenders ready to protect their world. Admiral Thelm stood beside her, reviewing the graduation scores. "Your methods are effective," he observed. "The pass rate is 97%. Our instructors couldn't believe it. "It's not my methods," Vasquez replied. "It's their motivation. They remember what it felt like to be helpless. They'll never let that happen again. That's more powerful than any training technique." "Will you stay for another class?" Thelen asked. Vasquez hesitated. She had been at Volani Prime for 6 months, teaching, rebuilding, healing from her own combat trauma. Part of her wanted to stay forever, to see this project through to completion. But another part recognized that the Volani didn't need her anymore. They had learned the lessons. Now they needed space to implement them on their own. "One more class," she decided. "Then I'm returning to Earth. You don't need me anymore, Admiral. You've become what you needed to be. Strong enough to protect yourselves, wise enough not to abuse that strength. That's all I can teach you. We will always be grateful," Thelm said formally, "for everything humanity did. Everything you personally sacrificed. You gave us more than defense, you gave us dignity." Chief Webb had similar conversations with his engineering teams. The reconstruction was essentially complete. The Volani had learned to maintain and improve the defensive installations. His presence was no longer necessary, though it remained welcome. "I'm staying," he told Vasquez over dinner in the officers' mess. "Not because they need me, but because I need this. After my wife died, I threw myself into work. Building things, solving problems, never stopping to think. Here I found something more. A purpose beyond just construction. These people needed help, and I helped. That's worth more than another shipyard or orbital station." "You're a good man, Webb," Vasquez said sincerely. "The Volani are lucky to have you." "I'm the lucky one," Webb corrected. "I found a home here. A real home, not just a barracks or a construction site. That's rare in this galaxy." Sergeant Dust had also chosen to stay, though his role was different. He couldn't serve as a combat instructor. His injuries were too severe. Instead, he taught survival skills, tactical thinking, and the mental discipline required for combat. His students loved him for his honesty and his refusal to sugarcoat the realities of warfare. "Fighting isn't glorious," he told one class bluntly. "It's terrifying, chaotic, and it never goes according to plan. People die, good people, people you care about. You survive by being smarter than the enemy, luckier than you deserve, and stubborn enough to keep fighting when every instinct says run. If that doesn't appeal to you, find a different career." No shame in that, but his students stayed. They had seen what happened when a peaceful people had no defenders. They would be those defenders, whatever the cost. The 1-year anniversary of the battle approached. Volani Prime had been transformed in ways both visible and invisible. The defense grid was expanded and improved. The Remembrance had been joined by 2 sister ships, with 3 more under construction. The training academy graduated new defenders every month. The economy had recovered, stronger than before, as trade agreements with humanity brought new opportunities. But the deeper changes were harder to quantify. Volani society had lost some of its innocence, gained a harder edge. Children grew up knowing about war, learning emergency drills, understanding that the universe contained threats. Some elders mourned the loss of their peaceful isolation. Most recognized it as a necessary evolution. "We cannot return to what we were," Ambassador Shiva said in a planetary address. "The scourge taught us that ignorance of violence doesn't protect you from violence. But we can honor what we were by being wise with what we've become. We are armed now, but we need not be aggressive. We are strong now, but we need not be cruel. We are prepared for war, but we work for peace. This is the balance humanity taught us." The anniversary ceremony was massive. Humans returned from across the galaxy. Soldiers who had fought here, engineers who had built here, diplomats who had negotiated here. The Galactic Council sent observers, curious about this human-Villani partnership that had become a model for other species. The memorial had grown. Additional sections honored Villani, who had died in the months after the battle from delayed injuries or trauma. A new wing celebrated those who had survived, with interactive displays telling their stories. School children visited regularly, learning about the battle and its lessons. Commander Vasquez, now promoted to general, gave her final address to the academy. Tomorrow she would return to Earth, her work complete. She looked at the assembled students, hundreds of trained defenders ready to protect their world, and felt satisfied. "When I arrived here 1 year ago, you were victims," she said. "You had been attacked by an enemy you couldn't defeat, and you prepared to die. Humanity intervened, not because we expected anything in return, but because it was the right thing to do. We fought for you, bled for you, died for you, but more importantly, we taught you to fight for yourselves. You are no longer victims. You are defenders. You have the skills, the equipment, and most importantly, the will to protect your world. The next threat you face, and there will be others, you will face on your own terms. You will be ready. That was our goal, and you have exceeded it." She paused, emotion breaking through her professional composure. "I'm proud of you. Not just as soldiers, but as people. You took the worst moment of your history and used it to become stronger without becoming cruel. You learned warfare without learning hatred. You became capable of violence while remaining dedicated to peace. That's harder than it sounds, and you've done it brilliantly. Take care of each other. Take care of your world. And remember, strength is a tool, not a purpose. Use it wisely." The students rose as one, saluting in the human military fashion they had learned. Vasquez returned the salute, tears she didn't bother hiding running down her face. Then she left the academy for the last time, knowing she was leaving it in capable hands. That night, a smaller ceremony took place at the memorial. The humans who were departing gathered with Villani friends to say goodbye. There were tears, promises to stay in touch, addresses exchanged. Some relationships had deepened into genuine friendships, even romances. Humans and Villani who had bonded through shared trauma and reconstruction. Ambassador Shiva found General Vasquez sitting alone near the memorial, staring at the names of the fallen. She sat beside her, saying nothing for a long moment. "Do you have regrets?" Shiva finally asked. "Many," Vasquez admitted. "I regret every person whose name is on this wall. I regret that we couldn't save everyone. I regret that your people had to learn about war at all. But I don't regret coming here. I don't regret fighting for you. That choice at least was right." "You gave us everything," Shiva said softly. "Not just defense, but hope. Before you came, we thought the galaxy was a place where the peaceful died alone. You taught us that sometime, somewhere, someone will stand up for what's right. That changes everything." "Just promise me something," Vasquez said. "Promise that you'll use what we taught you wisely. Don't become aggressors. Don't let strength corrupt you. Be the people you were, just protected now." "I promise," Shiva said solemnly. "We will be guardians, not conquerors. Defenders, not invaders. That is the human legacy here. Not how to fight, but why to fight and when to choose peace instead." The next morning, the remaining human personnel departed on a transport ship. They left behind a transformed world, a species that had learned to stand strong, and a promise. If Villani Prime ever needed help again, humanity would answer. As the transport broke orbit, General Vasquez looked back at the planet below. Lights sparkled across continents where life thrived. Defensive platforms orbited, keeping watch. The Remembrance and her sister ships patrolled the system, guardians born from necessity but maintained by choice. "We did good work here," Chief Webb said, standing beside her at the viewport. He was the exception. returning to Earth only for a visit before coming back to Volani Prime permanently. We did, Vasquez agreed. We asked what humans could offer a peaceful species under attack. The answer was everything. Commanders to lead, builders to fortify, bombers to defend. But most importantly, we offered belief. Belief that they deserved to survive, that they could become strong, that they weren't alone. That might be our greatest gift. The transport engaged its FTL drive and Volani Prime vanished into the distance, but its legacy remained. Across the galaxy, species learned about what happened there. Some asked for human help. Others decided to strengthen their own defenses. A few even began questioning the old galactic order, where the strong preyed on the weak and everyone looked away. Humanity had shown there was another way. It wouldn't change everything overnight, but it was a start, and sometimes a start is enough. 20 years had passed since the Battle of Volani Prime, and the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. Ambassador Shiva, now gray with age but still sharp of mind, stood in her office overlooking the capital city. The view had transformed from the floating artistic structures of her youth to a blend of beauty and purpose. Defensive walls integrated into architecture, shield generators disguised as sculptures, a city that was both peaceful and protected. Her granddaughter, Mira, sat across from her, reviewing reports for her new position in the Galactic Council. At 23, Mira belonged to the generation born after the Scourge attack, raised in a world where defense training was as normal as mathematics, where humanity was not a distant curiosity but a trusted ally. The Council is debating another intervention request, Mira said, frustration evident in her voice. The Talaxian colonies are under pirate attack. They're asking for help. The Council is stalling again, demanding committees and studies and impact assessments. People are dying while they debate. The Council has always been slow, Shiva replied. That hasn't changed. But we changed, Mira countered. Why don't we help them? We have 3 defensive fleets now. The Remembrance and her sisters are some of the most advanced ships in the region. We could reach the Talaxian colonies in 2 weeks. Why are we sitting here while others suffer? Shiva smiled at her granddaughter's passion. And what do you think General Vasquez would say if you asked her that question? Mira paused, considering. She had grown up on stories about the humans who had saved Volani Prime, about the general who had taught their people to defend themselves. Though Vasquez had returned to Earth 20 years ago, her philosophy remained ingrained in Volani military doctrine. She would ask if the Talaxians requested our help specifically, Mira said slowly. She would ask if we have the right to intervene in another species' territory without invitation. She would remind me that strength must be tempered with wisdom. Correct, Shiva said. Humanity taught us to be strong, but also to be careful with that strength. We don't intervene unless asked. We don't assume we know what's best for others. We offer help, never impose it. But people are dying, Mira insisted. People are always dying somewhere, Shiva said sadly. That's the cruel reality of the galaxy. We can't save everyone. If we try, we become what the Council fears, a military power imposing our will. The Talaxians must ask for help. If they do, we should offer it. But we don't make that choice for them. Mira sighed but nodded. I understand. It's just frustrating. We have the power to help and we're not using it. Power unused is not power wasted, Shiva replied. Sometimes the greatest strength is in restraint. That's a hard lesson. One humanity struggled with for centuries, but they learned it and they taught us. On Earth, General Elena Vasquez had retired from military service 5 years earlier. She lived in a small house in Colorado, writing memoirs that she would never publish and consulting occasionally for the Federation military. At 65, she remained sharp, though her body carried the scars of decades of service. Her communicator chimed with an incoming call from Volani Prime. She smiled, recognizing the signature. Admiral Thelen, it's been months. How are you? Thelen appeared on the screen, aged as she was but still commanding. He had led Volani Defense Forces for 20 years, transforming them from inexperienced civilians into one of the most respected defensive militaries in the region. General Vasquez, I hope I'm not disturbing your retirement. You know retirement bores me, she replied. What do you need? Advice, actually. The Talaxian colonies are under attack. They've formally requested assistance from multiple species, including us. The Council is debating, as usual, but Volani Prime has the capability to help. Should we? Vasquez considered the question carefully. What do you know about the Talaxians? Peaceful species similar to what we were. They have minimal defenses. The pirates are brutal but not organized. Local warlords not an existential threat like the Scourge. And if you intervene, Vasquez prompted, we can probably drive off the pirates in a few weeks. Minimal casualties. Then we help them build defenses the same way humans helped us, but Talon hesitated. I worry we're becoming what humanity almost became. The galaxy's defender, solving every problem because we can. That's a valid concern, Vasquez agreed. Here's what I think. You have the capability and the knowledge. If someone asks for help and you can provide it without overextending, there's nothing wrong with offering. But remember, you're not human. You don't have our resources, our population, our industrial capacity. Humans can afford to help multiple species simultaneously. You can't, not yet, so choose carefully. Help when asked, when it's within your capacity. But don't try to save the galaxy single-handedly. That's a burden that will break you. The Talaxians did ask specifically for Villani assistance, Theln said. They said they want what we have, peace protected by strength. They want to learn from us the way we learned from you. Then help them, Vasquez said simply. Send one fleet. Assign advisors. Do what we did for you, but maintain your own defenses. Never leave your home unprotected for someone else's sake. And make sure they understand. You're teaching them to defend themselves, not defending them permanently. Give them the tools and knowledge, then let them stand on their own. That's what I hoped you'd say, Thelon admitted. Thank you, General. Your wisdom is still invaluable. I'm just an old soldier with opinions, Vasquez said, but she was smiling. Take care of your people, Admiral. And tell Ambassador Shiva that I'll visit next year if she'll have me. She asks about you every time I see her, Thelon replied. You're always welcome here, General. Always. The call ended and Vasquez sat back in her chair looking at the mountains through her window. 20 years since Villani Prime and the work continued. Other species were learning the lessons humanity had tried to teach. That peace required strength, that strength required wisdom, that helping others was a choice each species must make for itself. The Terran Federation had continued its work as well. The Rapid Response Force had intervened in 7 major conflicts over 20 years, always at the request of the threatened species, always with the goal of teaching self-defense rather than creating dependencies. It wasn't perfect. There had been failures, losses, controversies. But humanity had stayed true to the philosophy established at Villani Prime. They fought for others, never for conquest. The Galactic Council remained skeptical of human motives, but even they couldn't deny the results. Species under human protection thrived. Former clients became independent defenders. The Scourge, once an unstoppable threat, hadn't successfully consumed a world in 20 years. Pirates and warlords thought twice before attacking worlds with human defensive advisors. Some called it a Pax Humana, human peace imposed through military strength. Others saw it as humanity accepting a responsibility the rest of the galaxy had shirked. Whatever the interpretation, one fact was undeniable. The galaxy was changing, and humans were the catalyst. Chief Engineer Marcus Webb had never left Villani Prime. Now 71 years old, he still supervised the shipyards, though most of the work was done by Villani engineers he had trained. He lived in a small apartment near the orbital construction facilities, surrounded by schematics and models of ships he had designed. His latest project was ambitious, a joint Villani-human deep space explorer designed to venture beyond charted space and seek out new species before threats found them. It was preventive defense. If you could contact peaceful species first, introduce them to the galactic community, help them prepare, you could avoid another Villani Prime situation. You're still working, a voice said from his doorway. He turned to find Mira, Ambassador Shiva's granddaughter, holding 2 cups of what Villani called tea and humans called liquid flowers. Can't seem to stop, Webb admitted, accepting a cup. Your people built fine ships before we arrived. Now you're building exceptional ones. Makes an old engineer proud. My grandmother wanted me to ask you something, Mira said, settling into a chair. She's writing her memoirs. She wants to know what you thought that first day, when you saw Villani Prime and knew you had 25 days to build defenses from nothing. Webb laughed, a rough sound from a lifetime of breathing construction dust and ship atmosphere. I thought we were insane. 25 days to fortify an entire planet against a fleet that had consumed 17 worlds? It was impossible. But humans specialize in impossible, so we tried anyway. He sipped the floral tea, still not entirely sure he liked it after 20 years. What I remember most was how willing your people were to learn. Most species would have panicked or gotten in the way. You lot just said teach us and absorbed everything we threw at you. That's why we succeeded. Not because humans are brilliant engineers, but because Villani are brilliant students. My generation takes that for granted, Mira said thoughtfully. We grow up learning defensive theory, combat tactics, emergency protocols. It's just normal education. But my grandmother remembers when none of that existed here, when violence was something from history, not preparation. Don't lose that perspective, Webb advised. The day your people think war is normal is the day you've lost something precious. You should always approach defense with reluctance as something necessary but not desired. The moment you start wanting conflict, you've become the problem. Is that what happened to humanity? Mira asked carefully. Everyone knows humans are good at war. Were you always that way? Webb considered his answer. Humans fought each other for our entire history. We nearly destroyed ourselves dozens of times. When we reached the stars, we worried we'd bring that violence with us, that we'd become conquerors. Villani Prime was proof that we could be better. That all our capacity for violence could be directed toward protection instead of conquest. Your people gave us that gift, a reason to be strong that didn't involve domination. So thank you for that. Later that day, the Villani Defense Force held its 20-year commemoration ceremony at the memorial. The monument had grown over the decades. Additional wings added to remember subsequent conflicts and honor those who continued the work of defense. Admiral Thelm stood before a crowd of thousands, military personnel, civilians, off-world visitors, human advisors who had stayed or returned for the ceremony. The original memorial still dominated, 3 figures representing humanity's answer to Villani Prime's call for help. 20 years ago, my people faced extinction. Telon began. We had no weapons, no soldiers, no concept of defense. We asked the galaxy for shelter, expecting evacuation at best. Humanity answered differently. They sent commanders to lead us, builders to fortify us, and bombers to defend us. They sent their best people, knowing many would not return. 3,000 humans died for a species they barely knew, on a world that wasn't theirs because someone asked for help. He paused, looking at the names etched in stone. Those 3,000 taught 8 million Villani how to survive. They taught us that peace, while beautiful, requires protection. They taught us that strength must be earned and wisdom must guide that strength. Most importantly, they taught us that we weren't alone, that in a galaxy that often seems cruel and indifferent, there are species willing to stand up for what's right. Today, we honor their memory by continuing their work. Villani Prime now helps other species the way humanity helped us. We send advisors to the Talaxian colonies next month. We share our defensive technology with the Pleiadian Alliance. We stand ready to answer calls for help within our capacity because that's what our human friends taught us to do. We also remember that strength is a tool, not a goal. We maintain our defenses not because we want war, but because we want peace. Real peace, protected peace. Peace that survives contact with those who would destroy it. That balance between capability and restraint is humanity's greatest lesson. In the crowd, Sergeant Marcus Dust Callahan stood with other veterans of the original battle. Now 52 years old, he still taught at the academy, training generation after generation of Villani defenders. His body carried permanent damage from that 40-minute stand at Shelter Complex 7, but he wore those scars with quiet pride. A Villani veteran stood beside him, one of the original volunteers who had learned combat during those desperate weeks. Do you think we're ready, Sarge? If something like the Scourge comes back? You're as ready as any species can be, Dust replied. You've got good equipment, better training, and most importantly, you remember what it costs to be unprepared. That fear, the healthy kind that keeps you vigilant, that's your best defense. The day you lose that is the day you're vulnerable again. The younger generation didn't experience the Scourge, the Villani said. They learn about it in school, train for defense, but they don't really understand. That's both good and bad, Dust acknowledged. Good because they don't carry the trauma we do. Bad because trauma teaches hard lessons. Your job, our job, is to make sure they learn those lessons without having to experience the trauma. That's why we keep teaching, keep training, keep telling the stories, so they're prepared without having to learn the way we did. After the ceremony, Dust visited the academy one last time. He was retiring finally after 20 years of service. His body couldn't take much more, and younger instructors had learned everything he could teach them. It was time. He walked through halls filled with training equipment, past classrooms where students learned tactics and strategy, into the memorial room where every graduate's name was recorded. Thousands of names now, defenders who had trained here and gone on to protect Valani Prime and other worlds. "Leaving us, Sergeant?" a voice asked. He turned to find Admiral Theln still in his dress uniform from the ceremony. "Body says it's time," Dust replied. "Besides, you don't need me anymore. You've got competent instructors, motivated students, and 20 years of institutional knowledge. The academy runs itself now." "It runs well because of the foundation you built," Theln corrected. "You could have left 20 years ago, returned to Earth, lived comfortably on your pension and medals. Instead, you stayed, taught our people, gave us 2 decades of your life." "Why?" Dust shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude. Had nothing better to do. "Besides this place, it matters. You matter. After a career of fighting, it's nice to spend time teaching people how to avoid fighting. Makes the earlier violence seem worth it, you know?" "I do know," Theln said. "That's why I've stayed in service as well. The work matters more than the comfort. Speaking of which," he pulled out a small box. "This is for you. Not from the government, from the people you protected at Shelter Complex 7. Dust opened the box to find a simple pendant, clearly handmade, depicting a figure standing before a doorway with smaller figures behind. The craftsmanship was amateur, but the sentiment was clear. "They're all alive," Theln said quietly. "Every civilian from that shelter survived because you and your squad held that line. They followed your career, watched you teach, taken pride in knowing you. This is from all of them. 3,000 people who owe you their lives." Dust stared at the pendant, feeling emotions he usually kept buried. "I was just doing my job." "No," Theln corrected gently. "Your job was to defend Valani Prime. You went beyond that. You sacrificed everything to protect specific people you'd never met, in a shelter you were never assigned to defend. That's not duty, that's heroism. And those people remember. On Earth, the Terran Federation faced new challenges. The success of interventions like Valani Prime had created demand for human military assistance that far exceeded capacity. Every week brought new requests. Planets facing invasion, colonies under pirate attack, species requesting defensive training. The Federation couldn't help everyone, and choosing who to help had become increasingly difficult. Fleet Admiral Marcus Chen, Elena Vasquez's former XO, stood before the Federation Council presenting his annual strategic assessment. "We're stretched thin," he said bluntly. The Rapid Response Force was designed to handle 2 or 3 operations simultaneously. We're currently managing 11. Personnel are exhausted, equipment needs maintenance, and we're burning through resources faster than we can replace them. "Are you suggesting we should stop helping other species?" a counselor asked. "I'm suggesting we need to be strategic," Chen replied. "Every request is legitimate. Every species asking for help genuinely needs it. But we can't be everywhere. We need to prioritize based on threat level, strategic importance, and capacity to help. More importantly, we need to train other species to do what we did at Valani Prime, teach them to help each other." "The Valani are already doing that," another counselor noted. "They're sending forces to assist the Talaxians. The Pleiadian Confederation has formed its own rapid response capability modeled on ours. Perhaps we're succeeding better than we realize, not by doing everything ourselves, but by showing others how." "That's the goal," Chen agreed. "But it takes time. Species need to build capabilities, gain experience, develop the political will to help others. In the meantime, we're the only ones with the capacity and willingness to respond quickly. The question is, how do we maintain that capability without burning out our people?" The debate continued for hours without easy answers. Humanity had created a new model for galactic relations. Help those who ask, teach self-sufficiency, never conquer. But implementing that model across a galaxy of thousands of species required resources and dedication that tested even human determination. General Vasquez watched the council debate from her retirement home, streaming the session over the information network. She had seen this coming 20 years ago at Valani Prime. Success creates expectations. Expectations create obligations. Obligations can become burdens if not managed carefully. She opened a communication channel to Admiral Chen after the session ended. You handled the council well, Marcus. But you're right to be concerned. We're doing too much. What choice do we have? Chen asked. Tell species under attack that we're too busy to help? Sometimes yes, Vasquez said firmly. Hard truth. We can't save everyone. Trying to do so will break us. The Federation needs to accept that helping one species might mean watching another fall. That's brutal, but it's reality. Better to help 3 species effectively than fail to help 10. The politicians won't accept that, Chen said. Then make them, Vasquez replied. You're Fleet Admiral. Your job includes telling civilian leadership hard truths they don't want to hear. We built our reputation at Villani Prime by doing the impossible. But we can't do the impossible every time. Eventually, impossible actually means impossible. Chen sighed. You're right, of course. It's just hard to say no when you know you could help. That's what makes us human, Vasquez said gently. We care too much sometimes, but carrying yourself to exhaustion helps no one. Be strategic. Help where you can make real differences, and keep pushing other species to develop their own capabilities. The best tribute to Villani Prime isn't humanity solving every problem. It's other species learning to solve problems together. 25 years after the Battle of Villani Prime, the memorial held its final planned ceremony. A new wing was being dedicated not to fallen soldiers but to living defenders. Every person who had fought in the battle and survived would have their story recorded here, preserved for future generations. General Vasquez returned to Villani Prime for this ceremony, her first visit in 5 years. At 70, she moved slower, but her mind remained sharp. Ambassador Shiva, now 85, greeted her at the spaceport with a warm embrace. You look well, Shiva said, though both knew it was polite fiction. They were old now, bodies failing even if spirits remained willing. I look like hell, Vasquez replied with a grin, but I'm alive, which is better than the alternative. How's your world? Thriving, Shiva said proudly. 3 defensive fleets, economic growth, and we just graduated our 500th class from the academy. Your academy, really? We still teach your methods. They walked through the capital city, Vasquez marveling at the changes. The blend of Villani aesthetics with practical defense had created something unique, beauty that could protect itself. Children played in parks that doubled as emergency shelters. Art installations concealed sensor arrays. Every aspect of society balanced preparation with peacefulness. At the memorial, thousands gathered for the dedication. Veterans from the original battle, now in their 50s and older. Current military personnel, civilians whose lives had been saved, and younger Villani, the generation born after the Scourge, learning about the battle that had defined their world. The ceremony featured stories from survivors. A Marine who had lost both legs but continued serving as an instructor. A Villani civilian who had hidden in the shelters and later became an engineer, building better defenses. A human pilot who had rammed a Scourge capital ship and somehow survived, now teaching flight tactics to Villani students. When Vasquez's turn came to speak, she stood slowly, leaning on a cane, and approached the podium. The crowd quieted immediately. I'm going to tell you something no one else will say, she began. The Battle of Villani Prime was a disaster. We lost 3,000 humans, 30,000 Villani. We barely won. If the Scourge had been slightly smarter or slightly more numerous, we would have failed. Everyone died. 8 million Villani would have been consumed and the galaxy would have shrugged and moved on. The crowd stirred uncomfortably. This wasn't the triumphant speech they expected. But we didn't fail, Vasquez continued. We won, barely, through luck and stubbornness and people like Sergeant Callahan who refused to retreat, when any sane person would have run. We won because Villani civilians trusted us enough to hide underground, while hell raged above them. We won because Chief Webb's engineers worked themselves half to death building defenses that shouldn't have been possible. We won because sometimes, just sometimes, impossible means very difficult instead of completely hopeless. She gripped the podium, looking out at faces young and old. I tell you this because I don't want you to romanticize what happened here. War is horror. Defense is necessity. We did what needed doing, but don't ever think it was glorious. The real victory wasn't killing the Scourge. It was that 8 million people lived to see the next sunrise. That's what we fought for. That's what those 3,000 humans died for. Not glory, not honor, just life, the chance for beings to keep existing, to raise children, to create beauty, to live in peace. You've built something remarkable here. A society that remembers trauma without being consumed by it, that prepares for threats without becoming paranoid, that learned to fight without learning to hate. That's harder than any battle, and you've done it brilliantly. The humans who fell here would be proud. I know I am." She stepped back from the podium to thunderous applause. As she returned to her seat, Sergeant Dust caught her eye and nodded with respect. Chief Webb, watching via video link from the orbital shipyards, wiped his eyes. The Villani in the crowd, 2 generations of them, honored the woman who had saved their world and taught them to save themselves. After the ceremony, Vasquez visited the original memorial one last time. The 3 figures, commander, builder, bomber, stood eternal watch over names carved in stone. She traced some of the names with aged fingers, remembering faces and voices. "I'm sorry we couldn't save all of you," she whispered. "I'm sorry some of you were 19 years old and died on a world you'd never heard of 3 months before. But I want you to know, your sacrifice meant something. This world thrives because of you. Other worlds learned from your example. The galaxy is slightly less cruel because of what you did here. I hope that's enough. I hope you rest easy." Shiva found her there, standing in contemplation. "Do you think they know? The ones who fell, do they know what their sacrifice achieved?" "I hope not," Vasquez said surprisingly. "I hope death is just rest, peaceful and quiet. If they're watching, if they see how hard we've struggled to honor them, that seems like a burden. Better to sleep peacefully, their work done while we carry on." "You're a strange person, General," Shiva said fondly. "Most would find comfort in thinking the dead are watching over us." "I find comfort in thinking they're at peace," Vasquez replied. "The living should carry burdens, not the dead. We remember them, honor them, learn from them. But we don't ask them to keep working after they're gone. That's our job." They stood together in silence. 2 old women who had seen the worst the galaxy could offer and somehow found ways to make it better. Around them, Villani Prime lived and thrived, testament to what could be achieved when someone asked for shelter, and others answered with everything they had. 30 years after the Battle of Villani Prime, the memorial became a galactic heritage site. Representatives from 50 species attended the dedication, recognizing the battle's impact on interstellar relations. The scourge had not successfully consumed a world in 30 years. Defensive pacts modeled on human intervention had saved dozens of species. The galaxy remained dangerous, but it was less hopeless than before. General Elena Vasquez died peacefully in her sleep at 75, her body finally giving out after decades of service. Her memorial service was held on Earth, but a second ceremony took place at Villani Prime, where thousands gathered to honor the woman who had saved their world. Ambassador Shiva, now 90, spoke at the Villani ceremony. "She came here when we were dying and she gave us life. Not just survival life, the chance to continue our existence, to raise our children, to remain who we were while becoming strong enough to protect ourselves. That is her legacy. Every Villani alive today, every child born in the past 30 years, exists because she answered our call for help." Chief Engineer Marcus Webb, now 81 and still supervising the shipyards because he refused to retire, spoke next. General Vasquez believed that humanity's purpose in the galaxy was to be strong, so others could be safe. She proved that at Villani Prime. But more than that, she taught us that strength must be tempered with wisdom, that power must be guided by compassion, that the capacity for violence is only valuable when used in defense of peace. Those lessons echo across the galaxy now, taught by species who learned them from her. Sergeant Dust, 72 and long retired, closed the ceremony with simple words. The general would hate all this fuss. She'd say she was just doing her job, that anyone would have done the same. But that's exactly why she deserves honor. Because she saw saving 8 million beings as just part of her job. Because she considered protecting strangers so natural that it didn't merit special recognition. That's the kind of person she was. That's the kind of person humanity became because of her. We should all aspire to that. The memorial on Villani Prime added her name not to the wall of fallen soldiers, but to a new section, those who showed the way. It honored beings who had fundamentally changed Villani Prime's trajectory, who had taught lessons that echoed through generations. Mira, now 43 and representing Villani Prime on the Galactic Council, stood before the memorial with her children. The youngest, barely 6 years old, asked the question that children always ask. Grandmother told me stories, but I don't understand. What are humans? Why did they help us? Mira knelt down, looking into her child's eyes and repeated words she had learned from her own grandmother. Humans are what happens when a species learns to be strong without losing compassion. They are friends who will fight for you not because they gain anything, but because it's right. They are teachers who show you how to stand on your own, rather than making you dependent. They are the answer to the question, what happens when someone asks for shelter? What's the answer? Her child asked. The answer is you send commanders to lead, builders to fortify, and bombers to defend. You send your best people to do the impossible. You sacrifice what you must to protect what matters. That's what humans did for us. That's what we now try to do for others because they taught us how. She stood looking at the three figures frozen in stone. Commander with tactical display, builder with tools, bomber with weapons. The memorial had aged well, the stone weathered but the message clear. Behind it the city stretched toward the horizon, beautiful and protected, peaceful and prepared. We asked for shelter, Mira said quietly. Humanity answered with salvation. That's their legacy and our responsibility. We pass it forward, helping others the way we were helped, creating a galaxy where no one faces extinction alone. The sun set over Valani Prime, casting long shadows across the memorial. In orbit, defensive platforms kept watch, human designs improved by Valani innovation, maintained by beings who understood that peace required protection. In the academy, new students learned the lessons that had begun 30 years ago. In the shipyards, new vessels took shape, ready to answer calls for help from species who needed what Valani Prime had received. The galaxy was still dangerous. Threats still emerged. But the response was different now. Species helped each other, taught each other, stood together against the darkness. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was better than before. And in the memorial gardens, where names of the fallen were carved in stone and stories of the survivors preserved for eternity, children played without fear, protected by the sacrifice of those who had answered a desperate plea for shelter, with everything they had. That was humanity's answer. That was humanity's gift. That was the legacy of the day the humans came not with evacuation ships, but with commanders, builders, and bombers, with everything needed to transform victims into survivors, to turn helplessness into strength, to prove that in a cruel galaxy, sometimes someone stands up and says, not today, not here, not while we can help. And that made all the difference.